Hello and welcome everybody to this month's webinar, 5 go-to moves to increase your pipeline velocity. And I'll tell you, if registration numbers and login before we get started numbers are any indication, this is definitely a hot topic. Can't say that I'm surprised that it's a hot topic. Anybody that's been involved in the go-to-market motions over the last 12 to 18 months, I think the battle cry has been pipeline velocity. We have got a agenda chock full of information for you. I think we've plugged in about 2.5 hours worth of information that we're going to cover over the next 50 to 60 minutes. Feel free to leave a chat if you have any questions. Ask a question in the Q&A panel. And we've even got a couple of polls going. So we're going to get some participation. We're going to start off with our first poll. As I welcome everybody to joining us, I'll tell you, I don't know what your experience was in 2023 and 2024, but the data said it was a tough working environment. We saw across the board challenges that sales organizations were having, go-to-market organizations were having. I'll talk about that in a little bit. The exciting and good news is that we started to see a return in end of Q3, Q4. And as more of the data is coming in across other sources, we're seeing that Q4 showed a rebound. We saw increased demands. We saw better overall performance. We certainly saw a lot more buyer and prospect activity. The challenge that we were seeing, and I'd love anyone that hasn't participated in the poll, please do so. The challenge that we saw going into, as we're coming into 2025, or now fully into 2025, I don't know about you, I'm still writing 2024 on my checks, for those of you that know what a check is. Just a little age joke there, everybody. The challenge is, while we were seeing the activity, we weren't necessarily seeing the same level of outcomes. So while we started to see a return to 2022 type activity, we weren't seeing closing numbers in 2022. We're finding that buyers today are much more finicky, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Let's go ahead, before we get into today's agenda, let's see what our result, what are our poll results here. What was our, oh, well, look at that. We got some great participation. It looks like the number one answer is getting sufficient deal volume. Okay, you're going to love that. Maintaining and accelerating velocity, we're going to be kicking in on that as well. Those are the two main things. That covers half of our participating audience, so thank you for that. We'll also be talking about engaging buyers effectively. Let's get into the agenda. I'm going to cover 4 things today. Real quickly, I'm going to talk about what's the state of our pipelines today. What are we seeing? Some recent research that came from EPSTA in terms of what's happening in the world of B2B sales. I'm then going to share the 3 key challenges that we see B2B sales organizations facing today. The 3 challenges that we have to adapt to, or what I talk about in the 3rd section, what's required to win in 2025 and beyond. Well, it's not going to matter. So what are the challenges that we need to overcome? What do we have to do to win in 2025 and beyond? And how about that? We have our first mistake in the deck today. We're going to be talking about 5 moves, not 4 cornerstones, but 5 moves to increase your pipeline velocity. Let's face it, 2024 was not an easy year. Coming off of 2023, which was not an easy year either, which came off of 2022. It was a phenomenally good year for the vast majority of businesses. A real significant shift in buyer behavior as 2022 ended and we came into 2023. What we saw in 23 and 24 is sales cycles have continued to lengthen. Deal values have gone down. We're going to learn that's for 2 reasons. And all that's been multiplied by win rates going down. So in chat, everybody, share what's your experience with these sales cycles. Does this align with your experience? Sales cycles going up, Deal values going down, win rates going down. So what are you seeing? Are you seeing the same trends? Are you seeing something different? Let's get some chat participation. Let's get some conversation going. What's your experience? What was your experience in 2023, and how are you feeling about 2024? The more you participate, the more I can customize my conversation to what we're feeling today. Now, if we think about the challenges that are facing sales organizations today, we've identified 3 key challenges. And the first challenge, which I think really comes into how we're struggling to manage our resources, and I don't know how you're feeling. I know. We were closed between Christmas and New Year's, and I was grateful for that because I was tired. I found that over and above a typical year, the market environment that we've been seeing has just, we've just had to work harder and harder. We've had to put more and more squeeze just to generate the same level of juice. And allocating resources has become far more difficult. It kind of reminds me of my golf game, right? When you think about my golf game, I found I only had 2 problems, right? There were only 2 weaknesses in my golf game, and that was my long game and my short game. Right. Today, we have to make constant decisions as sales leaders between how are we allocating resources towards our short-term objectives, driving the business that's in the pipeline, and generating more and more pipeline formation. How are we generating deal formation so that we're creating that lift so that as we enter the second half of 2025, as we go into 2026, what are the things that we're doing that are going to make 2026 and 2027 easier for us to achieve our objectives? So that challenge is balancing the short-term objectives with our long-term requirements to ensure that we can scale growth. What this has done is it's put us on even more of what I refer to as the treadmill of growth. What is the treadmill of growth, you ask? Running faster and faster just to keep in place. So that treadmill speed is cranking up, but we're not generating the progress for that. Now, one of the things that we're seeing is when we survey people, when we look at research done from others, we're seeing this exhaustion really take hold, and a large reason for that is we're still in this treadmill. We're still in this vicious loop of doing more and more and trying to achieve more and more with less and less. We've become dependent on speed. Again, think about this. We're doing more than we've ever done before, but are we taking more ground for that speed? Now, this is the first call to action that I'm going to make today. And that call to action is almost like a call to inaction. Rather than focusing on how can you do more and more with less and less, think about how can you do less with more. And what I mean by that is narrow down your priorities. Bring into focus what are the 1, 2, or key things, no more than 3. The 1, 2, or 3 things that will make the biggest difference in the go-to-market results for your organization. Again, balancing that short-term with long-term, and allocate greater resources to those efforts. What you'll find is you'll get far more traction. You'll generate more velocity, and you'll see the byproduct of that velocity is more progress across all of your objectives, right? When times get tough, we get myopic. If anybody watched the national championship football game last night, you'll recall that one of the things that Kirk Herbstreit talked about is how the quarterback has really slowed down the game, and that's why he's performing as well as he's performing. That's what he's talking about, is the difference between speed and velocity, and how important slowing things down, focusing on what's most important, and making traction against those most important things, having an impact on everything else that we're doing. So my first call to action is really take a look at everything that's on your agenda, everything that's on that go-to-market agenda, and ask yourself, if we could only do 50 to 60% of what's on the agenda, and let's be realistic, that's probably about all we're going to be able to actually do. If we could do 50 to 60% of what's on the agenda, what's the 50 or 60% that would have the biggest impact, that would have the greatest juice for the squeeze? Allocate your resources towards those most important things. You'll see greater traction and greater results. And then further, the thing that will get you the most off the treadmill is generating greater predictability. I think that's the thing that has us most exhausted today, is the rules that we lived by seem to have been exhausted. I was having a conversation with some clients over the last couple of weeks, asking them about what their sales cycles look like and how we were looking off at the beginning of the year. And one of the things that came across in the vast majority of the conversations I had was just how much harder it is to predict what your outcomes are going to be, and just how different the business environment has become. Seasonalities have kind of disappeared, ebbs and flows with where buyers are making decisions and how they're making decisions have been greatly disrupted. And people are all trying to figure out, what are the rules that we're living by? What are the things that we need to do to be successful? And there's probably nowhere where we see this more than in how today's buyers are behaving, right? We have seen unquestionably a return to buyer activity levels that we last saw in the middle of 2022. We're not seeing the same sales cycles. We're not seeing the same outcomes. We're not seeing the same deal values, right? So what we're seeing is greater activity and less action. Again, that speed versus velocity. Why is that? Your buyer today is more cautious than I don't want to say they've ever been, but the last time they were this cautious, and you'll see this in my final observation on this slide about today's buyers, was they're behaving like we're in an environment similar to 2009 to 2011, even though in reality, we're in a very different environment. We're in a much better economic environment than we were in. But no decision is the dominant choice today. Buyers prefer to wait than to act in haste. Buyers are double checking and triple checking. And the question about indispensability, do we need to do this? The number one fear that's going through buyers today is they make a decision today that looks foolish 3 to 6 to 12 months from now. Right? Risk aversion has embedded in the market. Your customers, your market are as risk averse. The last time they were this risk averse was the Great Recession. What that means for you is today it's about loss aversion. Right. If we take a look at the markets in 2020, 2021, and 2022, it was all about what's new, fear of missing out. And unless you're selling to the largest of the large companies and your website finishes in .ai, that's the only fear of missing out that's really taking hold in the market. And there's questions about how much that is really impacting from a real moving people towards decisions. Now, certainly everything going on with AI, we ran a webinar on this a month ago. It's available on our website if you want to check it out. AI has a lot of people concerned because they don't know what impact it's going to have. Most people know it's not having that much impact, but what if it becomes this real thing in 3 months? What we need to do is we need to change our messaging, our positioning, and our selling propositions from ones that are focused on telling them how much better things will be by changing to focusing on what they'll lose by not changing. In difficult markets, loss aversion has 10 times the impact to gain. They're overloaded and overwhelmed. Stop making them think so hard and so much. That's one of the things that we've seen, and one of the challenges with the more is our offerings are becoming more complex. Our job is to simplify the complexity for them. They lack the data and insight needed to make effective, confident decisions. That's the biggest opportunity that we have. We have the opportunity to create context for our customers, to create context for our prospects, help them understand what's happening in their world. Gartner calls this sense making. Help them make sense of what's going on. Far less about the new, far less about how smart you are. And today it's all about helping them make sense of their situation so that they can make confident decisions in reasonable periods of time. And remember, you've got to be building your business case early. And your business case better be financially driven, or you'll see longer sales cycle times, smaller deals, and smaller margins. Your biggest barrier to faster, more predictable sales is the perceived risk of change for your buyer. By the way, I want to emphasize this. It's the perceived risk of change. It's not the actual risk of change. It's the perception. Now, for years, sales organizations have beefed up. Like the lesson from 2009 was how to overcome status quo bias, make the case for change, right? Status quo bias is part of the problem, but it's not the cause. The cause is that risk of change. What we're seeing is buyers that are all in on the need for change, right? They're with you. You had them at hello when it comes to, do you need to change? Their challenge is that risk that they can't quite quantify and understand. What happens if the market environment shifts? What happens if something on the supply chain side goes wrong? What happens if we see an increase in tariffs? What happens if inflation comes back up? What happens if the opposite occurs? Those are the things that are going through your customers' heads that they need to make sense of, or they're not going to take action the way we want them to take action. And again, that's going to show in longer sales cycle times, which also means much more sales activity, higher sales costs, smaller deals, and again, just as importantly, smaller margins. We're going to be forced into greater discounting, more compression on price. If we want to be fully valued, we've got to create that context of not just why change, not even just why change now, but what's the cost of not changing. And this means we've got one big shift we've got to make in our go-to-market motions. Something that started to come really into flux in about 2018 or 19. I sometimes joke around that they no longer teach sales. They no longer teach selling and sales training. We've got to end our obsession with high intent. Don't get me wrong, high intent's great. There's still going to be high intent in the market. The challenge with the obsession with high intent is, well, first off, the research shows that we're only applying to about 3 to 5% of any market at any given time. And the difficulty with high intent is the perceptions are already there. Right, so influencing people with high intent, getting them to change course or speed, not impossible, but very difficult. And a very high level of commoditization comes in when we engage post-intent. We've got to reposition ourselves, right? Once the intent's there, most sales organizations were great, right? We didn't get through 2009, 2011. We didn't get through the last 2 or 3 years if we can't sell to companies with intent. The thing that's making our job harder is we've fallen out of balance. We're too focused on that short term, that high intent, and we're not building our markets. We're not developing our markets. And so what's it going to take to win in 2025 and beyond? What do we have to do? Well, the first thing we have to do is we have to increase our intention, right? I like to call this hypothesis-driven growth, right? We use the revenue acceleration framework for us. There are any number of frameworks out there. Choose the one that works best for you. But we need a clear, cogent strategy going to market. Our economics, our sales model, our positioning, our messaging. That needs to drive the structure of our organization. What's the system design that we have? What is the overall approach? What's our MO? What are the tools that we're using? How are we using technology? What's the scoreboard? How are we keeping score? Is there a balanced scoreboard? Or has our scoreboard become so late stage weighted that we're maybe continuing to hit our numbers on a quarter by quarter basis, but what it takes to get there is significantly greater squeeze, significantly greater pull. Our structure needs to drive our approach. This is where the intentionality comes in. This is where the opportunity for learning comes in. What are the playbooks, the processes, the methodologies? That drives our execution. Right? 3 key areas of focus. What's the go-to-market strategy, the business process design, and the sales structure? Now, for most of you, that sales structure involves salespeople. Sales structure doesn't have to involve salespeople. There are self-serve markets, and I know some of the people that are on the webinar today and that are watching the webinar in the future are practicing things like self-serve, product-led growth, partner-led growth, et cetera. What is that underlying structure, and how does that align with our business process and our go-to-market strategy? And our go-to-market strategy requires 3 key elements that need to be documented and understood. Number 1, what's your target schema? Who is your target account? The days of target account selling are no longer optional. If you don't have a clear distinction between target accounts, target market, and non-target, you're going to get commoditized. And what you're going to see, the first sign of commoditization, is compressed margins, followed very quickly by longer sales cycle times. Right? If we don't know who we're trying to stand out with, we're not going to stand out. We're not going to be able to make that connection. The second place, which I'm going to get into a little bit more depth in a minute, is we need clear point of view messaging. We need to make it about them and helping people frame the decisions that we want them to make so that that guides the path to sale. We're able to lead the process rather than follow the process. A couple of years ago, I read a book on a recommendation, and what I got from it was absolutely not what I expected to get. This is probably the greatest book on operations that I've ever read. And for those of you that are involved in revenue operations, RevOps, it's the greatest book on RevOps that I've ever read. Yet I don't think that there's a single word about revenue in the book. Many of you are probably familiar with this book. It's called Team of Teams. It talked about how the U.S. made the adjustments in the Middle East to account for insurgencies and deal with a level of complexity that had, to that time, never existed before. And I'll tell you, as I was finishing the book, General McChrystal shared a thought that to me just bowled me over. and help me understand this is the central change that we need to make to be able to succeed today and into the future. At the core of the journey to adaptability, and that's what we're looking for, is adaptability, lay a yin and yang symmetry of shared consciousness. And this is the important part, achieved through strict centralized forms for communication and extreme transparency and empowered execution, which involve decentralization of decision-making and execution. So centralization for communication, transparency, and tracking execution, and decentralization of the decision-making and actual execution. That's what we need to do to be successful today. And let me tell you, if your CRM isn't at the center of all of this, you're gonna be challenged. Things move too fast. We've got to, if I'm going to use the term incorrectly, right, because I want to exaggerate for effect, we've got to micromanage the central communication, or we need to micromanage the actions and the activity. If we're not building that process center that's built into a CRM, whatever CRM you're using, that's driving higher velocity action, not faster action, but higher velocity action, and feeding that back to you so that you can make better, faster decisions and make those adjustments to the strategy that get translated into execution more quickly, more adaptably, and more resilient, you're going to find markets harder and harder to sustain. You're going to find your competitive position gets eroded. Right. There's 3 powerful points, and think about how you're using your CRM and ask yourself, can you confidently say you're getting these 3 things? Number 1, greater focus that drives a more proactive motion, that drives a more proactive approach and ensures more time and effort is spent on higher value activities. Look, the research shows that salespeople are spending only 25 to 30% of their time actually selling. If you're anywhere near that, you've got a problem. And I'm here to tell you, your CRM is part of the problem. It enables a strong end-to-end experience internally and externally, increasing productivity and throughput. What is throughput? Revenue generated per whatever unit you're using to measure. One of my favorites is revenue generated per employee. Right. It is a customer management platform. If you're using your CRM to log information, you do not have the information that you need. If you're using your CRM to manage your customer, to manage the customer experience, that holistic journey, then you're in good shape. And the third point is it helps you close the loop, enabling stronger insights into why you win, why you lose, and how to improve performance. The best companies using CRM today and in the future are going to start calling it a PM system rather than just a CRM. It's a performance management system. They're going to be managing performance. The CRM is going to be at the center of enabling greater performance. How? By creating that centralized transparency and mode for communication so that strategy can be translated to execution and execution can feed back into strategy at faster and faster and more effective rates. So that's the infrastructure that we need. We need to balance that infrastructure with content, and not just any type of content, but insight-driven content. We've been so focused on talking about us. We've been so focused on solutioning that we forgot that buyers need to understand their problems first. Insight-driven content is the type of content that changes how your market thinks about the problems you solve. See, if you've waited for your customer to already identify the problem that they have before you become relevant to them, well, you're nice to have. And there's lots of options that are out there. If you're the one that's making sense, and helping them realize they have a problem. Help them realize that they need to make an adjustment that they haven't been thinking about, that they're losing by not changing. You become a market of one. You stand out, you resonate, and you win. Insight messaging has 5 key components. The first component of insight messaging is that it's focused on your prospect's world. It's not about you. It's about them. It's about their issues, not your solution. It challenges their thinking. That's the most important part. If you're not challenging your market's thinking, the truth of the matter is you're not relevant. Right? I'd like to say it in a nicer way, but that's just how it is. You're not relevant if you're not challenging their thinking. We're not looking for amens. We're not looking for, oh my gosh, that's great. At least initially, right? Great ideas are met with resistance. It's okay that your message is getting resistance. And by the way, if everybody in your market, I was going to say loves your messaging, well, that's not really possible. If somebody can't hate your messaging, if someone can't disagree with you, if I can't vehemently disagree with you, I can't vehemently agree with you, right? The middle is no longer the playing field. We've got to move to the extremes. How can we have the biggest impact? How can we become indispensable to our customers? And how do we generate that relevance before they have need and intent? The third component is it connects partially or fully with an important or critical issue in their world. Again, it's not about nice to have. It's about how do you connect to the must have. The first 3 parts are about your market or about your customer. The next 2 are about you. Insight-driven messaging connects and plays to your advantage, and it leads to an investigative or diagnostic sales process. It's a, why should we talk about this? Why should we think about this? Why should we investigate this? Not just a, why should I buy from you? Here's the fundamental question that you need to answer. Are you indispensable today? You're either indispensable or you're nice to have. If you're nice to have, there's a virtual unlimited number of options for your customers to take action. And again, the question of do they take action becomes key. But when you demonstrate indispensability, when you become core to key and critical results for your customers, that's when you stand out. That's when you win. That's what generates pipeline velocity. That's what generates momentum. How can you be indispensable to the critical results, to the critical few results that your customers have? So, what can we do? Move number 1. Flip how you're selling. Sell the problem or be commoditized. Right? The dominant approach to sales is a solutions-focused approach. We start off, we qualify the lead, we come to understand. And what we're doing here, I refer to this as kind of the thought leadership approach to sales. Hey, these people are really smart. Hey, these people can help us. Right? That's nice to have. Right? It's not bad. The difficulty is it doesn't change the course or speed that somebody's on. It doesn't take something that wasn't on the agenda to put it on the agenda, and it doesn't change how they think about the agenda they have. Right? What an insights approach does is it sells the problem first. Right? If you want to change how people think about you, and let's be clear, if we want someone who's not buying from us to buy from us, we need to change how they think. We change their thinking first. It flips it on its head rather than kind of getting to the problem later, rather than asking the customer about their problem. It focuses on teaching the problem. Right? It's about sale number 1 in the 3-sale mindset. There is a problem. This is the problem. Change needs to happen. And I'll add a fourth one, a fourth decision. Here's what happens if change doesn't happen. That's what we need to be focused on from the beginning to generate velocity. And when we get people coming to us, and they're going to come to us, high intent customers are going to come to us asking why we're the best choice. We've got to address that, but we need to deliver it with an insights approach so we're connecting back to the problem. If the problem's not clear, the predictability goes away, and so does the value. See, we've got to stop talking and spending all of our resources and our time talking about why you should buy from us and why you're going to be better. And we've got to talk about what's the benefit of buying from us. I'm not saying don't talk about the benefit of buying from you, but it needs to be accompanied with a very clear, what's the cost of not buying? Right. And this isn't about a self-serving, overly manipulative approach to sales. It's about helping customers understand what is the cost of not changing, what's the cost of staying the same versus the cost of change. Too often we leave a clear cost of change for a conceptual benefit. What are your customers losing because they're not changing how they perform? And that means we need to master 2 sales motions. We need to develop the market. We become so obsessed with customer acquisition and revenue acquisition that we forgot we need to build markets. And so one of the things that we've seen, and we've conducted, I think last year we conducted about 50 different analyses of companies' go-to-market motions, and what we saw was a reversion in the funnel. As companies had embraced more of a development approach to the market, we started to see more robust funnels. But what we've gone back to is a problem that we once described as bulging funnel disorder. Right, if you look at the first funnel illustration, that's a bulging funnel. A whole lot of stuff at the top of the funnel with limited bottom of the funnel because everything's stuck at the top. It's kind of like my storm drain before we fixed it. When it would rain, 4 feet of water would back up because it couldn't handle it. The opportunity for us, the opportunity for sales organizations to generate greater throughput is to build stronger middles of funnel. Develop the market. Developing the market is all about the actions that we're taking before there's high intent. How are we influencing the intent that prospects have so that when the intent hits, we're already in the right place at the right time? Right, that's what selling is. Selling after there's intent, that's receiving, that's catching sales. Nothing wrong with that. Right, and for those of you that have markets where the intent is generating at such a rate, there's I had a coach that once said to me, Doug, just because the fish are jumping into your boat doesn't mean you're an angler. Doesn't mean you're a great fisherman, right? And don't get me wrong, if the fish are jumping in your boat, you keep paddling that boat around and let the fish jump in, right? Now, remember, that only exists for a limited amount of time because if nothing else, more boats are going to come in, right? You've got to develop that market so that you can win, right? This isn't just about sales development. This is about market development. This is about implementing an intentional, purposeful, multi-channel, multi-medium approach to how you're generating, how you're finding, attracting, winning, retaining, and expanding customers. Find, attract, win, retain, expand customers. How are you doing that? What is your playbook to ensure that the right action is taken by the right group at the right time, in the right way, with the right person? The companies that excel at that feels like they have X-ray powers. They win with what looks like less effort. It's actually not the less effort. It's the better design and better structure of their go-to-market motions that are enabling them to win. And that's where the battle's going to be fought more and more going forward. There's plenty of good solutions out there. The question is, how good is your go-to-market motion? How is your go-to-market motion influencing your market? Stop spending so much time just trying to get people to buy from you. Focus on activation. And in activating your customer base, score the problem. Right? I've always said there's two hurdles that need to be overcome to win business. The first hurdle is, why should I talk to you? It's the let's talk hurdle. The second action is, why should you buy from me? Well, if we think about the two motions, development is all about let's talk. And activation is about getting that conversation to occur on an ongoing basis and to expand that. Selling is about the buy from me, right? Develop the market so you're in a position where you have to do less selling. And the way you do that is by implementing what we call lead activation plays, right? It's about, why should we talk? Why should we look at this? Why should we dig in? It's about moving people from engagement to curiosity so that they own their problem, so that they understand their problem. It puts you in a leadership position. Right? It further allows you to score their problem. So as an example, we have a lead activation play around CRM assessments. And one of the components of the CRM assessment is a CRM scorecard. We can actually score their problem. So it's no longer just a problem. It's, your CRM utilization is a 52 on a scale of 100. Would you like to do something about that? It's exactly right, Debbie. It's about becoming a trusted advisor, and not just in words. It's in deeds, right? We have clients that take tools like this and they use this to track their execution. By the way, I knew I was successful in putting these together when I called on a prospect and they had one of our scorecards. They were a prospect. They had a scorecard, he had a scorecard pinned right above his desk that he could track. When non-customers are using your stuff, when non-customers are using your insights to guide their actions, that's when you know you're having influence. Activate. Look at your deals. Look at every one of your deals that's stuck. Look at every one of the opportunities that you've identified that hasn't become a deal yet, and ask yourself, why should they talk to us? Shift your messaging there. Shift your plays there. You'll get conversations. Conversations become meaningful conversations. Meaningful conversations become impactful ones. Impactful ones generate opportunities, and they enable you to win. Now, hopefully one of the key takeaways that everyone has from the first part of the presentation today is buyers today are more risk averse than they've been in 15 years. Or how about that? I got my math wrong. Yeah, 15 years, actually. So over 20, oh, holy cow, 15. Time flies. Right. One of the things that we need to do in response to that is we need to make buying less risky. And what's one of the ways to do that? Land and expand. Start smaller. Start simpler. Win and expand. Now, this doesn't happen accidentally. I call this strategy, by the way, building cash flow farms. This doesn't happen accidentally. This requires real planning and purpose, right? Too often I've seen companies go, oh, we'll win this small deal, and then we'll turn it into a big deal. That's not how it works, right? You really need to think about strategically, where's something that you can get to lower the risk for them. By the way, lead activation plays begin to do that. right? That's what that activate column is all about. We begin to start getting benefit from you. Here's how to know if your sales process is contributing to your revenue, right? And that is, would someone be willing to pay for a sales call? Are the actions and activities that your salesperson is taking, are they generating the type of value that someone would have been willing to pay for that? If they're helping to make sense of somebody's world, that's an experience that someone would be willing to pay for. Combine that with marketing that generates value as well, that generates insight, then you start cooking, right? It's about building and managing the entire customer relationship and the entire customer journey. Right? We're so focused on awareness about us that we forget they need to be aware of the problem first. Right? What are we doing so that they understand their problem? How are we educating? How is marketing working with sales together in a combined strategy, in an orchestrated strategy, so that more and more customers start thinking about and talking about moving into that consideration phase that enables more decisions? That then further feeds into the retain and expand opportunities. And move number 5. This doesn't happen by accident. Implement a purposeful learning and development program in your organization, and you'll multiply the impacts. Do less with more. Generate greater velocity. Get more juice for the squeeze. The multiplier for this is learning and development. Learning and development isn't just training. It goes beyond training. It's what's the strategy. You'll notice I use visuals all the time. I almost can't talk without a visual. Frameworks are what enable people to align. Frameworks create a visual component to the words that we use. What are the frameworks that you're using? How are those frameworks translated into the technology that you're using? Too often, the two are completely disconnected. What's the training that you're providing? Look, what's the old saying? I can't control the wind, but I can control or adjust the set of my sail. Right? We've got our people working so hard, so fast, they have no time to think. Well, when that's happening, they have no time to set their sail. They're going to get pulled into the direction of the winds, and that's commoditization. Training and coaching becomes a key element. Now, training and coaching becomes far more manageable with frameworks built into our technology implementation, which then feed into the key measurements, which creates a whole virtuous cycle. Companies with strong learning and development see 10 to 25% better economics. So margins, sales cycle, sales time, deal value, deal volume. A 30 to 50% retention improvement. And by the way, that's even higher among their best, most productive employees. And an increase in efficiency of 5 to 15%. I get it. We're all stretched for time. Take some of that. Remember that. What's the important stuff? Find the resources to invest in learning and development for your organization. You'll see the payoff. Alrighty, I've just thrown a lot at you. What can we do to take first actions? So here's what I want you to do. If you've got some other first action, please follow that. But if you're sitting here right now and you're going, okay, Doug, this was great, but what do I do? Pick one of these things. Review and rank your pipeline. But do it a little bit differently here. Don't rank it just by its value. Rank it by how well the problem is defined and monetized. Right? By the way, go back and look at your past sales, look at your best sales, and take a look and ask yourself, how well was the problem? How clear was the problem in the prospect's mind? Right? I think what you'll find with with great concentration, not all your best deals, but most of them had better problem definition. Spend more time defining the problem. You'll find defining the actions and getting your customers to take action on those problems becomes a whole lot easier. By the way, for most sales organizations, that's an inversion of where they spend their time. Most salespeople are spending their time on what does the customer need to do and less on what's that underlying problem that justifies what they need to do. Segment your database. Most of you, I'm sure, already have some level of intent or are paying attention to intent already. Add an element of fit. What should be driving your target account strategy? Your target account strategy should be driven by high fit far more than by high intent. Add lead activation plays to your playbook. If anybody's wondering, what can I do with lead activation plays? We're happy to talk to you. If you don't want to talk to us, just look up lead activation on our website. We have a webinar that we did a couple of years ago. I actually took a look at it to make sure it was still relevant. It is. So if you want to get some ideas about lead activation, and for those of you that really want to impact 2025 and make 2025, 2026, and 2027 the best 3 years in your business's life, audit your go-to-market strategy. Take a look at what is our strategy. Is it coherent? Is it cogent? What's our point of view messaging? And what's our path to sale? For those of you that would like some help on that, we do have some slots available for our revenue acceleration readiness assessment. Think of it as a comprehensive checkup for your go-to-market strategy. We look at your growth economics, what's the strategy and approach. We'll do a full assessment of your messaging, your sales plan, and the underlying journey that you're taking to the market. We've got a little bit of time here, so let me open it up. If anybody has any questions, feel free to chat them. If anybody has, there's a Q&A section. Oh, we've also got our poll. Forgot about that. Got carried away. Some of you could probably tell. Also, if you'd like to ask your question, you can raise your hand, and we'll take the risk of putting you on audio. Let's take another minute. Any questions that anybody has? How did you feel about the webinar? Did you find this helpful? Close the loop for me. Give me some chat. Alrighty. At this point, since nobody seems to have any questions, we can go ahead. We can close out the poll. I want to thank everybody for your time and attention. I know how valuable an hour is. I can tell you the vast majority of people stuck around for the full hour, so thank you. If we can be of any help or assistance going forward, please don't hesitate to reach out. Have a great 2025.